So welcome everybody. This is going to be an amazing interactive conversation with the team at ZayZoon. For those of you that don't know us, InterGen, my name is Khalid Hansraj. I'm the program director here at InterGen. I'm joined by my team, our CEO, Sandy Gilbert, events and planning, Emily Hillman, marketing, Tony, and there probably could be a couple board members. And if I don't see you, I'm sorry. Maybe you can pipe up and let us know you're here. But yeah, we have a great and esteemed team with us here today. But before I jump into the show, I'd like to introduce our partner, Fasken. Jason Giborski will be doing a few intros of the team that I'm interviewing today, and then we'll get going. So Jason, over to you.
Thanks, Khalid. Very excited to be here and partner with you folks. And of course, very excited to hear from ZayZoon. So for those, just as a brief overview, ZayZoon introduces a distinctive approach that benefits employers and employees through something called earned wage access. And so their platform provides convenient, secure, and adaptable options for employees to access their pay on demand, not having to wait for payday. And so it redefines how companies treat their payroll, gets away from conventional pay cycles. And, this type of platform holds the potential to reshape workplaces and fosters employee empowerment, financial well-being, and satisfaction, and ultimately productivity. And so with us today, we have Darcy Tuer. He's co-founder and CEO of ZayZoon. He began his tech career in 2000 in Calgary, Edmonton, and founding Halo Networks while studying electrical engineering at the University of Alberta. He co-founded Spira, I believe I pronounced that correctly, Data Corp, and served as a president of that for 11 years. He's extremely passionate about Calgary's technology ecosystem and social impact. And he's very committed to financial wellness and also very active in social causes, including a longstanding role with the Missing Children Society for the last 12 years. We also have Tate Hackert, co-founder and president of ZayZoon. He's had a bit of an unconventional path to technology entrepreneurship. He's a West Coast Canada native, experienced in commercial fishing, and a self-taught lender using Craigslist. He graduated in economics from the University of Victoria and the City University of Hong Kong. He founded ZayZoon to offer an alternative to payday loans and focusing on short-term financial solutions for customers. And as we'll probably hear, ZayZoon now serves over 10,000 businesses in the US, providing an earned wage access platform. And finally, we have Derek Payne. Many of you probably know. He's an independent board member and advisor who's deeply involved in Calgary's startup and emerging technology scene. He's an advisor, he's a mentor, board member, community member. And he's on ZayZoon, ZS2, Jostle, and the Epilepsy Association of Calgary. He's a mentor for the Haskell School of Business Scale-Up program, whereas I believe I first met him. And he's an entrepreneur resident at Platforms Integrated program. So welcome, everyone, and very much looking forward to hearing everybody today.
Thanks, Jason. Awesome. So we're going to get going with Tate. Tate, tell us what instigated the creation of ZayZoon.
Hey everyone, and please make this as interactive as possible. If you have questions, want to get into tactics, want to learn anything specific, yeah, let me know. I'm happy to make this super conversational. I'll give the high level of ZayZoon. I'm sure there's some people that have heard this, so I'll try not to go on for too long. But yeah, as alluded to in the bio, I grew up on Vancouver Island. I grew up in the fishing industry, so commercial fishing from a young age, and made like way too much money as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. When I was 16, I did a second mortgage for an individual, which fancy terms for the person, didn't have the credit to get a mortgage. And so I lent it to them privately. And a year later, I got a check back with interest. And I thought, this is a pretty cool way to make money. I can just give money out and get more money back. And so I went crazy with it. I put ads up on Craigslist. I, met with individuals, ran my own little risk algorithm in my head as to whether they deserved the money or not. And ultimately, between the age of 16 and 23, I lent out a little over $250,000 in were ultimately short-term, small dollar loans. I think like as I was doing that, and this kind of leads into ZayZoon, the whole market was completely unknown to me. And so as you start to deal with a lot of individuals living paycheck to paycheck, you start to think like, well, like, why is this? What products are out there servicing them currently? Why are people living paycheck to paycheck? And ultimately, like, how can I scale my own business to do better for them, but also do better for myself? And so what ended up being out there, what was discovered was there's like overdraft fees, there's payday loans, there's services that aren't really good for the consumer. And the thought of ZayZoon was, can we provide the same sort of utility? Can we provide short-term liquidity to an employee without all the egregious fees that come with it? And so, I think, ZayZoon today, again, as alluded to in the intro there, we've partnered with over 10,000 businesses across the US, representing 30 or 40,000 locations, storefronts, where their employees can access their pay prior to their regularly scheduled payday. And they can do so for anywhere between $0 and $5. So super responsible, consumer, friendly company in that sense.
Great. So Tate, was your MVP like a landing page that gathered a bunch of financial data for you to make an assessment and adjudication of whether you want to land as Tate or not? Or how did you go about going from this intuition to lending to then segueing into the early days of ZayZoon?
Yeah, MVP, I guess it's how you define it. Like, I would say the MVP was meeting people in a Starbucks and handing them an envelope of cash and, crossing my fingers that I get it back in 60 days. But I think the more probably relatable MVP is back in 2015, Darcy. We call it like the swivel chair moments. So it's exactly what you said. Like we had a landing page. We had one employer here in Calgary that was doing employee advances. And so we said, well, hey, like instead of doing employee advances, give them the link to our landing page. They can enter in their information. We would get an email with that information and how much they're selecting. We would swivel chair around to the other computer and type their information into Interact e-transfer, send them the money, swivel chair back, send them a note and saying, hey, your money's on its way, and then invoice the employer for the repayment back. And so I think that was like very, very early stage MVP. But that allowed us to advance out around $30,000 over a period of 3, 4, 5 months. And that ultimately was like, okay, like, look, we have the research, or we have like the industry data of short-term liquidity crunches. We know that an employer gives advances. We have stats on the employer giving advances, and we now have like a really early indication of an employer actually interested in having a third party provide these advances on their behalf. And so that was enough for us to then raise some money and expand it out to other businesses and other channels.
Very cool. Very cool. Darcy, so what's your business model? Maybe if you want to get into the intricacies of your business model, your target customers, and how you reach them.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say, when I hear Tate talk about the business, I get like re-energized. We should start our mornings off like that. But thanks to everyone for joining. And thanks to InterGen. Just a quick little note on InterGen. Like, InterGen's been a tremendous supporter of ZayZoon, and they were there for us when almost no one was. We wouldn't be here if not for Sandy and the team's support. So just shout out to those guys. So yeah, our business model, when like I always say this, I've said this a lot recently, but I think it's worth noting, when you're building a business, you need like really 3 things. You have to be solving an important problem, and Tate talked about that problem. That problem has to persist, ideally through a large base of like people or businesses. And then you need a path to access those people in ideally a way that provides like economic viability for the business, at least in the near term. And so when we think about ZayZoon and what the business model is, our thesis And Tate and I came up with this. We're working employer by employer, but then we're like, well, in a perfect world, people get paid every day through payroll. And there's lots of reasons why that doesn't make sense. So our go-to-market is predicated on partnering with payroll. So we're partnering with 160 payroll companies in the US. We add partnerships every week, hopefully every week, sometimes every 2 weeks. And that grows the top of the funnel for us. And then we work with them. It's important to them because they're looking to add logos, retain logos, build their book. We help them differentiate. So that's important. They get value. And then we work with them to create awareness within their businesses we can do that through product motions, sales, marketing. And then businesses find out about us and they say, hey, my biggest challenge today is recruitment, retention, productivity of my workforce. And we let them know, we tell a story that answers their so what. Hey, we can help you with one of your biggest problems. And to Tate's point, we can white glove it. It's no work for you. And this is a socially responsible, impactful benefit you can provide that's going to help your bottom line. And we can quantify it. And there's also lots of qualifiers. So that's how we've gone to market. That's how we've got to over 10,000 businesses. And we're adding hundreds of businesses a month now.
Excellent. A lemming like me would think there's probably only like 5 or 6 payroll providers, because we all know the Ceridians and the ADPs. But it sounds like there's hundreds of payroll providers out there.
Yeah, you've got the juggernauts, and they're kind of like half the market. ADP named us their partner of the year. So they've gone to market, I think, in a really intelligent way where they provide payroll, but they have a marketplace where there's a barrier to get onto the marketplace, but then they let the cream rise to the top. And where like the market regulates what the best offering is by way of businesses adopting them. And so we're thankful we won. We worked hard to win Marketplace Partner of the Year last year with them. That was against 650 other software companies. So I think it's a strong signal that our go-to-market is working. It's not a slam dunk. Like we have to really work on it and improve it every day, but a great signal for us for sure.
I think it's actually it's a good point you bring up though, because when we started, for everyone on the call, we actually aren't live in Canada today. So even though we're a Calgary-based company, 100% of our business is in the US. When we started in Canada. And to your point, like there are only really 2 payroll companies in Canada. There's ADP, Ceridian that control 80% of the market, and then there's 3 or 4 others that have the other. And so we very quickly realized like, oh, we're way too early for an ADP or Ceridian to want to adopt this. Whereas in the US, by contrast, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of payroll companies. And then there's still the ADPs and whatnot, but hundreds of these payroll companies control half the market. And so for us, it was like, we could very easily go down and get that business quickly. And so we kind of looked at each other and we went, all right, well, we did more business in the US in a 3-day conference than we have in the last 18 months in Canada. Maybe we should pivot down.
It was a funny story because Tate and I and Jamie, our other co-founder CFO, we'd raised I think like a $700,000 seed round on the premise that we were going to win Canada. And then we're like, this is hard. Like we're not getting the traction. And so it felt, I think it was like a couple weeks after we closed that round, Tate and I on a whim flew down to the US, attended a trade show. Tate had made, which is one of Tate's superpowers, he'd made some great connects in that space. Some people we've hired and still work for us today. So we had to go back to our investors and say, okay, a bit of a pivot, like feel free to withdraw your investment, but we're actually going to double down and go into the US market in earnest. Canada, we think it's just not ready yet.
Yeah, well, great story. There's a lot of entrepreneurs on the call this morning, and I think if ADP and Ceridian, let's say, were early channel partners, or if your guys is, those are big companies to get on the radar off and get them to take what was a small startup back in the day, take you guys seriously enough to even entertain a meeting. What do you think was the catalyst that got you the meeting, got you the deal, got you the reseller partnership, and ultimately got ADP to promote you and put you onto their marketplace, which then led to distribution?
Hey, you got to tell the ADP story because I think that's really worthwhile.
I don't know if I know the ADP story.
We were the
Just
first,
mean like the
we were the first company on their plot, right? And then
fair. Okay, so yeah, maybe to distinguish, like we didn't get them early on, right? Or we did, but there was some back and forth. And so earned wage access was very new back in 20. I mean, it's still new today, but even in 2016, 2017, it wasn't an industry yet, right? The term earned wage access wasn't coined, and so we were working with ADP on this idea, and we helped build out the marketplace that Darcy's talking about, the APIs that ADP now has to integrate with all of these external parties. Back in 2015, 2016, we actually helped them build those connection points. And we were the first earned wage access provider in the ADP ecosystem, and it lasted all of about 7 hours. And then they shut us off, and we went through a bunch of legal and regulatory hoops, and ADP turned earned wage access off for the next 2 years. And then really it was in 2018, 2019, where conversations opened up again. And I think at that point in time, like, you know, you're right, they're a juggernaut. And so there was a couple things that happened. Like ZayZoon had persisted through a few years of business, and so we showed that there's some longevity there, and we showed that we were, you know, building our business separate from ADP. The other thing is earned wage access in general started to explode as an industry, and some companies were getting a lot of VC backing, and a lot of funding was going into the space, and so it was something where ADP could look 2 years out and go, oh wow, like this is something that we need to wrap our arms around. And so then I think that's where the partnership really took off.
Awesome. Great story. For the people that have joined us, what's the difference between earned wage access and a payroll loan? Darcy, that's a question for you.
Oh, okay. So we didn't know this when we started. Like, we started to really get familiar with the market and do our research and diligence, and we went and met some payday lenders. And I remember, and they're not bad people. Like they have terrible business models, right? So then we think that like the product they provide hurts people more than helps, which is a premise of a big part of our premise and purpose. The big difference is the busiest day for a payday lender is payday, because people have borrowed from their future selves. And I always say this, like I tell my kids, make a decision, your future self is going to benefit or there's going to be a consequence. Like, be aware of that. So when you use a payday lender, you pay hundreds of % interest and you're borrowing from a future paycheck. The whole theory behind earned, now there's early, there's earned, where earned wage access is, you think of it as a personal income statement. You've accrued income, but it hasn't hit the cash flow statement yet. So we provide that liquidity on earnings. You're a creditor to your employer. Employer's not paying you every day because it's expensive. They're managing their own working capital, and it's expensive to move money. It's administrative. So that's what we are. We are hit a button, access a portion of what you've earned. You're not borrowing from yourself. So instead of being embarrassed about it, you should be empowered because you worked hard for this. And I'm going to pick up an extra shift tomorrow because I'm going to have my parents over for Thanksgiving this weekend. So I'm going to pick up an extra shift, withdraw my cash onto a card where I get more purchasing power so I can buy a bigger turkey, right? Like, literally, that's how we think about the customer, and it's free to me. I get more buying power.
Very cool. Talking about buying a bigger turkey, what is ZayZoon Perks?
Tater.
Yeah, certainly. ZayZoon Perks is so you know, earned wage access we see as like the first product of many that can be offered to our customers. And why that is we're providing a service that's really needed, and we're providing a service in their most vulnerable moments, and we can build an immense amount of trust with our customer base in that regard. And so there's a lot of products that can come thereafter to help service them in other regards, but also act as profit centers for us, right? Perks is an early version of exactly that. It's our own marketplace of things that we can offer up to customers that help us execute on our mission of saving 10 million employees $10 billion. And so very specifically, like some of our perks that we have a gas card. It is any gas station in the US where MasterCard can be used. this gas card can also be used. And there's a 5% cashback component for employees. We have insurance savings for auto insurance. Again, our average customer saves about $702 in annual premiums by going through this affiliate insurance offering. We have a financial education platform with dozens and dozens of courses and calculators to help someone with their budgeting or student loans or retirement savings. And so that would be like our ecosystem of perks that we serve up, separate from earned wage access. And I think what's interesting from a thinking in business terms, like we use those perks to test ideas. We use those perks to see like what is resonating with our customer base, what's resonating with our client base of employers, and are these perks that we can are these perks that we can actually take and build out a more fulsome solution around. And so that's what I mean. I don't know if we'll get into it at all, but that's what I'm really excited about for what we call like phase 2 of ZayZoon. You're on mute.
Thanks, Tate. Does a vendor, whether it's the insurance provider or Canadian Tire that you partner with to do perks with, is there a revenue share agreement with you two or with you guys, or is this truly altruistic on ZayZoon's part? How does that work?
No, there's definitely a revenue share. And so, Darcy says it best. I think when we first started ZayZoon, Darcy, you always talk about like a double bottom line, right? And so we can, if we can provide a service that saves someone money and again, like goes towards our ultimate mission of saving 10 million employees, $10 billion, but we can make money while doing that. Like that's the most beautiful combination, right? Like at the end of the day, we're a company where we're trying to provide a return for our shareholders, for ourselves, for our employee base. And so, it's very important that, yeah, there's profit in there.
And that was just to pile onto that, like my time at Missing Children's Society, and I'm still involved. That's where it drove me nuts. Like we built an incredible platform that we didn't monetize, or we really struggled to monetize. And so that's what I love about ZayZoon. Like we have to build a sustainable business model for us so we can achieve our maximum potential impact as a company, which to Tate said, save 10 million people, $10 billion. And we track that on a regular basis.
Awesome. That's excellent. Gonna switch gears now over to Derek. Derek, tell us how you met ZayZoon.
Yeah, thanks, Khaled. InterGen, it's kind of funny how it all happened, and InterGen was certainly part of all of it. At the time, I had just gone through some medical stuff myself, and decided that I was going to take what I thought was going to be a temporary step back from my professional career, and it hasn't been so temporary. And just got involved with the universities in the city, started working with a couple of startups, was having fun doing that, and wanted to do more. I just didn't know how to find that. Got introduced to Sandy. Sandy and I had a coffee up at Mob Squad and learned about InterGen and what they were putting together, and it was kind of just perfect. It was exactly what I was looking to do. And so we expressed an interest. We agreed that we might just work together. Went to the first ever InterGen breakfast, the one in-person event that we had before COVID shut us all down. Met Darcy at that event, and seemed to hit it off. It was shortly after I met Darcy, I was out for a beer with a friend of mine, Ray DePaul. Ray runs the Innovation and Entrepreneurship program at MRU. Ray and I both have an interest in the tech sector, and I asked him, like, who do you like in the city? What who do you think are doing some interesting things? And his immediate response was ZayZoon. Yeah, ZayZoon's got a great team. They're doing some interesting things. So that was kind of box, number 2 for me. And then InterGen, as part of their fund, made a portfolio investment in ZayZoon, and as part of their investment got a board observer seat. Sandy and Darcy were talking about, who should fill that seat. My name came up, and I was, familiar to both parties, and it was perfect. So joined the organization as an observer, and it was kind of interesting how it all came together, but it was exactly what I was looking to do.
Awesome. And how long has it been since you started as an observer?
I think I would have looked that up before we joined this call. So I started as an observer, but Darcy, I think it was after my second or third meeting. And even though
Yeah.
I was an observer, I still, I read the materials, I prepared as if, I was on the board and ready to answer questions and respond. And the board was great. There were parts of the meetings where the board, asked my opinion. Sometimes the observer situation is more, pull your chair back away from the table. It wasn't that way at all. And I think it was after my second or third meeting, the board was going in camera. So, I said, okay, guys, I'll sign off, see you at the next meeting. And I don't know who it was at the table said, Derek, why don't you stick around? And board went in camera and, you're adding value. You seem like you fit in. Why don't you just join the board? And I think after 2 or 3 meetings as an observer, I agreed to join the board.
Awesome. Great transition. How did you know it was a perfect match? Like, what was the aha moment where you said, I'm going to stick around and this is a really good symbiotic relationship?
So at first I didn't know it was a perfect match. I'm glad you asked the question about payday loan, because I think like a lot of people, you hear about earned wage access and you automatically think payday loan. And I don't know that I, want myself or my staff doing that. And so, I had to educate myself on, everything that Darcy and Tate have just talked about today. But then for me, I'm involved in a lot of things. I help a lot of startups, but I always want to make sure that I'm getting something out of it as well. And, I've got lots of experience. I think I can add a lot of value to organizations, but my experience was more kind of just pre-IPO, kind of almost the phase that ZayZoon's getting at now is where I would come in and then help the transition. I really didn't have experience early stage venture financing and things like that. Certainly didn't have fintech or SaaS experience. And so it was exactly the area where ZayZoon was at. They had a board of directors with people from Morgan Stanley ShareWorks and Chime Bank and Finance It. So it was a great opportunity for me to join an organization, sit at a board table with people with way more experience and a lot smarter than me, and add value and contribute where I can, but also learn and benefit myself.
Great. Derek, you're on the board of 3 scale-up companies in Alberta. What would you say is the most common operational gap they all have?
There's a few. The first thing that comes to mind for me is kind of 2 things. Market fit, customer acquisition. A lot of scale-ups, they want to be all things to all people, and they don't know exactly where they fit. And if that's the case, how do you go out and acquire the customers that you need if you don't know exactly who those customers are? That's the first one that comes to mind. Talent acquisition and retention. I think a few years ago in Calgary, the ecosystem was tough because it wasn't big enough. There wasn't a large enough pool of resources here. I think that's certainly started to change, but then COVID hits and hybrid work environment. Now all of a sudden those employees you have can work anywhere. And so even though the talent pool had grown in Calgary, that talent pool can go work anywhere. And so those are probably the big ones for me. And when I think of both of those, and I think about, why ZayZoon is here on a panel with a sold out crowd, is because they've excelled at both of those, right? They know exactly who they are in the earned wage access space, right? They're focused on the US, they're focused on the SMB market. They access their market through payroll providers. Like, it's just very disciplined and focused. My background with both WestJet and Dirt, I think 2 of the more culturally unique companies, certainly in Calgary, and it's something that I really believe in. The current world we live in, hybrid work and things like that, culture is hard to do, yet, Darcy and Tate and Jamie and the team have managed to do that. And so I think one of the reasons they've been successful on the talent side and keeping and maintaining people is, probably as good as any of the startups I've seen. They've built this, this culture, which I think is harder to do in the environment we're working in today.
Yeah, good points. Darcy, Tate, do you want to talk about culture? We see it a lot in our work here at InterGen. We go through 400 or 500 companies a year, and all of them have some type of cultural evolution or issue going on with respect to, you know, what people should be doing and what they're doing, and, you know, what people should be doing when the boss isn't looking, etc. How have you guys been able to, as a fast growing company, early stage, lots of different types of characters in the company, how have you been able to consolidate what people should be focused on, whether or not you're in the office and whether or not you're looking?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I want Tate to add on because he's a huge part of our culture. When I met Tate, like ZayZoon's my third startup, I made a ton of mistakes, continue to do so. But when I met Tate, like there were certain attributes he had as a person. Like I always test someone when they come to me, and Tate pitched me on the concept of ZayZoon. And really, when an entrepreneur comes to me, they're not pitching the concept on its own, they're pitching themselves, right? And so, you know, we look for resourcefulness and relentlessness if we're looking to invest in people or even mentor people. That's an investment. So I did that with Tate, and he has that in spades. And so when we thought about culture, we kind of looked inward, and you have to, imposter syndrome aside, you've got to say, well, what are the best things about us that we think are going to help us build a strategy and execute like relentlessly on said strategy? And so Tate, Jamie and I did that early, like day one. Well, maybe not, maybe day two. We were like, okay, what are the things about us that we think we want to make sure become ingrained, like culturally ingrained into the fabric of ZayZoon? And we built that off of our core values. We built that into how we hire. And it was this, I'm making it sound all perfect. It was by no means perfect, but with that was always a North Star for us from that culture. And we apply that to the board. We apply that to our investors. We apply that to our partners. So that's kind of how we think about it. And then Tate, you want to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, I think like maybe tactically, there's a few things that we do that help keep that cohesion on a daily basis. We do a daily scrum every single day. We're 110 people now, and every single morning 110 people are on a call. And it's a 15-minute call, and it sounds crazy and it sounds like it's not doable, but we've put in place the right structure for that. And we do announcements, a team presentation, and then shout outs. And those shout outs are related to our core values as a company. So I'm going to give Derek a shout out for, you know, X, Y, and Z. That's a core value of mastery at ZayZoon, and this is why it's important to the business. And so every single time someone talks on Scrum, they need to relate that back to one of our annual initiatives or our 3-year goals, right? And so I think that helps like keep alignment in the organization. And like ultimately, like when you're driving towards something together and you're you know, able to learn together and be challenged together, like to me that's pretty engaging culture. We measure our culture, so we quantitatively know that, you know, like we have an ENPS score of 82, which for those that don't know, ENPS is on a scale of -100 to +100. A Nike and an Apple is going to land somewhere in the 30 range. So we're very proud of that, and we continue to, you know, do things to engage employees throughout, whether it's Scrum, Drink and Thinks, et cetera, right? Events like this that we host internally. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah. Just switching back now to you know, what InterGen does, which is really connecting people like Derek and many people on the call, like Mike Whitfield and Rob Baldoff, and many of our InterGen business advisors that are on the call, connecting them with the growing companies in Alberta. You know, we're really trying to help transfer this knowledge intergenerationally, but also there's an element of mentorship that happens inside of these connections that happen through InterGen. Darcy and Tate, do you want to speak to how mentorships positively influenced and impacted your business, your career, but also the speed at which you're executing, which sounds like it's pretty breakneck and rare, to be honest.
You want me to go for it, Darcy? Yeah. I would say like Darcy and I both really lean into mentorship. You know, Darcy said one of my superpowers is connecting with people. I mean, it's one of his superpowers as well. And we've always thought like, you know, if we surround ourselves with the right people, we'll figure that path out. It might be a windy, long, awkward path, but eventually we'll get there, and we'll have a pretty good time doing it too, which is super important. And so I think like mentorship is very important to us. We continually seek out mentorship, whether it's you know, in the form of continuous education and like podcasts and whatnot, or if it's actual mentorship with an individual like Derek or you know, others that we've brought onto our board and have in our networks, right? I think so without getting too much into it, like I actually think mentorship's an awkward word. And if anyone wants to Google it, I wrote an article on LinkedIn. It's called How to Be a Mentee. And I think like how to be a mentee is really what you want to strive for, because mentorship's this like weird word that assumes there's this mentor-mentee relationship, but ultimately like you're forming a bond with someone else where you're both benefiting, right? And so as a mentee, it's just as important for you to give value back to your mentor as it is for the value that you're looking for from them. And I think that's just like something that, you know, we've leaned into and really is what has helped us grow ZayZoon. I don't know if you want to say anything on top of that, Darcy.
Yeah, I well said. And the only thing I would add is, you know, when you're a founder, your most limited resource is your time. And so what this was a lesson I had to learn, which was like, I love going out and talking to people who've done what I'm trying to do, who know a lot more than me in certain areas. But my recommendation as I think about mentorship is like, we have a job to do. We think about it we've got a job to do over the next 3 years. We have a really good sense of what the next 3 years look like. This is a bit fuzzy. We really know what we're going to do over the next 12 months. And over the next 90 days, the next 13 weeks, we have a much clearer sense. Be deliberate about who you're surrounding yourself with to help in those various time horizons. Because you can just burn yourself out going and having coffee conversations. You want to be quite deliberate about that.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah, no,
I
well
add
said.
something here?
Yeah, totally, Derek.
So like you know, the question you asked me about perfect fit, I think the one thing Darcy, Tate, and I all have in common is, you know, I spent a lot of time in the ecosystem helping out. You know, we had an audit committee meeting yesterday, and these guys have a lot on their plate at ZayZoon. Yet, you know, Tate's doing his Long Calgary initiative. You know, Tate's doing things to promote the ecosystem. I meet a lot of founders, and more often than not, I'm talking to a founder and, oh yeah, Darcy's great. Oh, Darcy and I had coffee. Like the amount of time, you know, these two guys give back to founders is not insignificant considering what they've got on their plate. I think that's something that the three of us have in common as well, that, you know, they're really generous, and in addition to growing ZayZoon, they're also doing their part with other founders and other startups.
Very, very cool. Thanks for highlighting that, Derek. Tate, plans for expansion. What will it take? We've got a lot of people, intellectual capital, probably a lot of financial capital on this call. How can this group help you, or their network help you? Like, what are some of the key tops of the mountains that you're really got your gun in towards for 2024?
Yeah. So one of the things we're starting to explore is potentially return to this beautiful country. I don't know if that's not able to be said, but we're starting to explore it. And so whether that's a 2024 initiative, 2025, I think just like everyone on the call wrapping their heads around what earned wage access is, and talking about it with the business owners that you interact with, and your peer groups and all of that, because, you know, ultimately when ZayZoon does enter back into this market, it helps with some of that resistance that we received in the past. So I think, you know, that's a big one for us. You know, other than that, like we continue to put one foot in front of the other and try to just execute on the plan ahead of us. And like Darcy said, like mentorship's a big thing, and for us, like we've never done this before. Like you know, Darcy's serial entrepreneur. I've had a few things, but like neither of us have been at a stage of a company this size before. And so when we look in the next year from going from 110 people that we are today to 170 people, 180 people, not that people's a measurement, but I think, it's a good indicator of revenue progression. Like, we're looking for other people that have been along that journey, and give us a sanity check along the way, right? And let us bounce some ideas off, because I think it's far and few between, and it's a really cool, fun journey to be on, but it's also one where we're like, we have no idea what's going on.
Well, thanks for being vulnerable there.
Hey, Khaled.
You're fresh off a big financing. Does that help you guys focus on a few key areas, or is that round of financing really just to lift up the enterprise in all manner and shape and form?
Yeah, Sandy, did you want to jump in there, or do you want to?
Yeah, I was just, before you answer that question, it would be great. Thanks, Dart. I was just curious, your clients are payroll providers, but as Tate said, talking about earned wage access and what's going on out there, big employers that are out there that may want to take advantage of this, getting them to understand what it is and then pressuring their provider to actually offer it could be something. So it's not just the payroll providers you can talk to, it's all large employers that want to provide a benefit to their employees, I think. So everybody here that's involved with a large employee can talk about that when they're there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. That we certainly see that too, Sandy. As the market progresses, there's pull dynamics and push dynamics, right? So I think that would be a great pull dynamic, right? And we use that to generate opportunity in the US. Like, someone who loves us goes to a new employer and says, hey, like, I use ZayZoon, and yeah, I think that would be super helpful. Thanks for pointing that out. So just as it relates to onboarding more capital, and I love talking about it as like kind of like maybe more of an academic progression of ZayZoon for those founders on the call, because there are models and frameworks out that people should be following, and that those will get into academia, and in some respect they are, but where we sit as a company, so we're post Series B, and so what that means is we've got product market fit. We have a really strong thesis and like I would say statistically relevant data that says we can acquire a customer, the lifetime value of that customer is in a healthy ratio. Like, for us, it's quite healthy, like a 7-8 to 1 ratio on margin. So for us to acquire a customer, it costs $1, and we're going to get $7 back in a 10-month time horizon, right? So what that means then is, well, you can rate, if your addressable market is large enough and your go-to-market smooth enough, which it is by way of that ratio, you can raise a bunch of money and grow the existing business. So Tate, Jamie, and I were this morning going through our budget for next year, and we're like, we think about it in two ways. One is, let's grow that core business, like, because that's product market fit, and just continue to do what we're doing and do it better, faster, stronger, get better data. But Series B to Series C means you have to drive enterprise value beyond that product. And so what that means is, you have to think about, it could be a new geography. You have to think about how you drive enterprise value from a few metrics. One is sustainable revenue, right? So you have to grow sustainable revenue. Consulting doesn't count as sustainable revenue, right? So it's got to be recurring or reoccurring revenue. You need to ideally grow revenue per customer, or ARPU, right? And the most common way to do that for a company at this stage is to find adjacent opportunities within your own product suite to drive more value that you can monetize. And then you need to take on a data practice and be really smart about your data. So that's how we're going to use the proceeds. Do what we've continued to do, better, faster, stronger, continue our healthy ratios, so a burn ratio of less than 0.5, ideally a 7 to 1 CAC ratio. What's your sales velocity? So for every $1 we spend in sales, we generate $2.50 in ACV, right? Annual contract value. Though you have to monitor those efficiencies. That's your core business. That's like table stakes. So the hard part, where we use Tate, let's say, who is a visionary on how we can make our product better. So how can Tate drive curiosity through ZayZoon, where we have this discovery that could be something that dwarfs earned wage access and like turns the market on its head. We're not going to bet the business on that, but we're going to look for signals. So I could go on forever on that, but that's where we are as a company.
Darce, that was very, very, very good. Thank you for going into detail. I think a lot of people need to hear that. That's great. Let's go to questions from the panel. And I see Don Sweeney here has a great question. I think Don was HR for Trican or Calfrac. So, Don, if you're on the call still, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. Good morning. Hi, Darcy. It's been a few years since,
Yeah, good
since
to
we
see you,
connected.
Don.
Yeah, good to see you as well. The question that I had was just about larger companies that don't use a third-party provider in-house like Trican did. Is that still something that you're looking at, or are you strictly sticking with payroll providers now?
Yeah, it was, yeah. So backstory there, Don and I looked hard at ZayZoon back in the day. So to answer your question, we actually have a portion of our channel that we call Tate, what do we in the integration channel? So where we would implement with SAP, Workday, and other providers. So Don, if you're using SAP, for instance, or Workday, we would have at least a core integration. So we could, in fact, for us, we have to do the LTV calc. Like if you were using Workday and you only had 300 employees, it might not make sense for us from a cost perspective, but those are things we would certainly look at.
Excellent. That's good to know, Darcy, because companies that I'm working with now are, and as you mentioned, from a staff retention perspective, is so critical. And it's such a great opportunity for companies just to offer something that's a little bit different, and the wage access that they've already earned is, I love the empowerment approach that you've taken. I think that makes such a difference. So I just want to say congratulations to you all. I'm so pleased to see how far you've come.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate it. Actually, a good example like Don's was my last software company, Spira. Badger was a client of ours, one of our bigger clients, and they heard about ZayZoon and they came to us and they're like, can we use, and we had to share the same thing. We're like, we're not in Canada, but they're in the US. And so it was pretty cool. They're like, what's this implementation going to take? And we found out there with ADP where it said 15 minutes. So we have thousands of people on the platform in 15 minutes. So those Calgary connects, to Sandy's point, and to Khalid's question, like those can be powerful. And thanks for jumping in, Don.
Absolutely.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. Was someone saying something?
Darcy, it's Art. Good morning, Darcy and Tate. Great presentation, guys. So I'm thinking about capital again and cost of capital, like ultimately to get big enough to supply the Canadian market or even big companies in the US. Don't you need a cost of capital that's better than most of your customer companies? And how do you get that? And I guess I'm trying to understand how much your equity capital raise goes to run the business, but you must have credit lines that support all the loans effectively that are out there. So maybe share a bit of your thoughts on that with us, please.
Or are you just worried that as an investor, you're going to get a cash call here, or what's let's be honest. So that is a beautiful question. And that's like probably when you go into diligence with a VC, you look at companies like Clearco and some of the companies that just couldn't handle the stress test of like your true cost of capital and that how that impacts your unit economics. So one of the beautiful things about ZayZoon's business model, and I'd say we were super smart, we came up with this, it was a byproduct of how we deployed. We turn our capital every 9 days. So what that means is we might have a 10% cost of capital, but we turn it so efficiently and we drive a return of capital that's orders of magnitude higher than our cost of capital. So we could actually absorb a 2 or 3x increase in cost of capital. And like I say to investors, if that happens, we've got broader macro issues to deal with. Everyone's gonna be living on the street. So we can't be lazy about it, Art, and we always have to drive that down. We announced a $20 million US capital facility previously, and we're just in the process of more than doubling or tripling that to support demand, because our dollars are like inventory, right? We ship millions of dollars a day out to our customers, $95 at a time, so they can buy food and put fuel in their car. So we have to maintain the rigor in managing the risk on that capital and being as efficient as possible. So that ties into what we pay, the bigger the capital pool is, the more competitive the market is, the banks to each other. So now we've got a syndicate facility we're looking at that will help manage people's risk, but drive that cost down. Does that help?
Oh, absolutely. The turn comment, the 9-day turn, that's key, I think. So very, very helpful. I don't know if there are more questions, but curious about Canada. Like, how far out is that, and what does it take before you can handle it?
It takes a strong business plan and a business case, and so and an anchor partner as well, right? And so I think like we're starting to, the reason I mentioned Canada is we're starting to feel the pull more and more. Now the pull is one thing, actually determining whether it's an appropriate, business case, and if it's worthwhile taking the focus off of the US and coming back in some capacity, that's a whole nother case, right? And so I think like there's a lot to determine there, but the reason I bring up Canada as an interesting thing that we're at least looking at is because we are receiving that pull like crazy now, and so it'd be foolish for us to ignore that pull. But again, like how that translates into actually launching is a whole nother thing. I did want to mention one thing, and ties into an earlier conversation too. So like, if you're looking at like a payday lender as a competitor by way of the utility that they provide, right? And you're wondering, well, like, why does a payday lender charge so much? And you're not charging that much, and like, what's the difference in cost of capital and all of that? I think it's really important to note that like, payday loans charge a lot, not because they're trying to make money hand over fist, but they charge a lot because they have to. They're brick and mortar. They are old school pen to paper administrative practices. But the biggest issue is that they have a bunch of good customers that subsidize bad, which basically means for every dollar that they give out, 15-20 cents of that dollar doesn't come back. And so their loss rates deeply, deeply impact their revenues and their profits. Whereas ZayZoon, because we insert ourselves into the deduction, because we actually see the earnings that employee is making, and we're not making an educated guess based on their next paycheck. We actually see the earnings in real time. We're not overextending, and because we put a deduction onto their paycheck, we're able to eliminate that risk to almost nothing and pass all that savings onto the consumer.
Very helpful. Thanks, Tate. Thanks, guys.
Great questions, Art. Thanks for chiming in there. Anybody else have any questions? I saw a question here in the chat. I forget who asked it, but there's a question about how exactly do you make money?
Yeah, so typical use case, an employee comes into ZayZoon because they need to buy gas for their car, they need to get medications, they need to buy groceries. Those are literally the top examples as to why someone uses ZayZoon. They're coming in halfway through their pay period. They're taking about $100 on average. They take that money and they send that money to either their bank account, to a ZayZoon prepaid debit card, prepaid Visa card that we have, or to a gift card. And that gift card can be used at, like that gas card, at multiple locations. So when they access that money, if they're taking it to their own bank account, it's a $5 fee. If they're taking it to the other two options, it's completely free for them. Come payday, we deduct the $100 from their paycheck with the $5 fee or no fee on top of that, depending on, again, how they access that money. Does that make sense?
Maybe I'll chime in too. Our thesis is like our customer is the employee, right? So we want to provide them upward financial mobility, help kind of get them smarter by creating habits where they make better, they're better custodians of their own finances. But there's so much business benefit. Like we really start to become that connective tissue between the business and the employee. We offer the ability for businesses to subsidize or pay for ZayZoon because we can, like I said, quantitatively show the business case. this is a market grab, like we're winning the category. So we know employees will pay, but we do see a transition to this being seen more as a benefit, especially if we're adding on other really meaningful products that we can tie back to value for the business. So it's really, we see the market, the macro landscape changing, and we have some conviction around what that's going to look like.
Very cool. That's a great answer, Darcy and Tate. Thank you. There's another question here. I'm not sure who's asking it. MS. You want to ask the question, please?
Yeah. So if people, businesses, and we've seen this, businesses provide weekly pay. That a lot of I think what our market's largely SMBs, so like small, mid-sized, 2,000 employees or less. Because of the payroll channel, it's really indexed us to that cohort, if you will, which is 99% of the businesses in the US, half the workforce. So it's a pretty good market. We do have businesses that pay weekly. The challenge with that is that's still not enough for employees. They're getting half the paycheck and they're still really living hand to mouth. Most people in the US can't handle a $400, and Canada, a $400 unexpected expense. The interesting thing is with weekly payroll, we see the same or more usage on ZayZoon than bi-weekly payroll, which there's probably a deeper discussion around that. So what we've seen is the opposite, where businesses will switch to a 2-week or twice a month pay cycle and then offer their employees ZayZoon, because that provides more benefit to the business, and then employees can have access to their cash.
Yeah. Behaviorally speaking, how often does the same employee come back for earned wage access over a 1-year period, say?
Yeah, an employee basically uses it to bridge their pay. So if they're getting paid bi-weekly, they take it a few times a month. If they're getting paid weekly, they take it, maybe a little bit more. They're effectively using it to bridge that middle period in their pay cycle.
Awesome. Any final closing questions?
Darcy, how many payday loan companies are there in the US? I don't think you shared that. And this was the thing that was just staggering to me.
Oh my gosh. So just when we were raising our Series B round, we actually, we started with customer testimonials. Oh, man, did that ever get people to lean in? And I don't know why we didn't think of that sooner, just on the impact. But there are more payday lending companies in the US than Starbucks or McDonald's. So it's pervasive. It's unbelievable. And again, they're not pure evil. Like Tate said, they're just not nearly as efficient businesses as ZayZoon. So we want to cure the world of those broken businesses.
Awesome. That's great. Well, with that, thank you, everybody. I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors before we wrap up. The top 7 over 70, RBC, Synovus, Sandstone Asset Management, Prairie Scan, Alberta Innovates, and Opportunities Investment Fund, Calgary Economic Development. So thank you, everybody. See you guys Q1 next year. We're going to be leading in with our health tech series starting in January. So we'll see you then. And Merry Christmas. See you at the Wine Wednesday, December 6th at our Christmas party.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Tate. Thanks to ZayZoon, Derek.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. It's a great turnout.